Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, Robert Meyer Burnett. I invite you to watch and listen to the Designing Hollywood podcast, brought to you by Martika Ibarra and the great, legendary Hollywood costume designer, Marilyn Vance. I am afforded the wonderful opportunity of co-hosting the show. If you are interested in the magic of Hollywood, the design of Hollywood, the clothes of Hollywood, watch the Designing Hollywood podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts from, or find the video version on the John Campea YouTube channel. That's right, the Designing Hollywood podcast. Why would you ever want to miss it? Especially if you love the movies.
Hey, my name is King. If you don't know who I am, my name is Israel King. I'm a writer, director, and anime commentator on my main channel, King Tannic. Now, if you've been a fan of pop culture for any amount of time, then you surely must have noticed the sudden rise in popularity in anime and manga. Films breaking box office records, series topping the most pirated show of the year chart, and of course, the very apparent fan base that has surrounded it. According to a poll back in February of this year, about 50% of Gen Z watches anime. Now, if you're not Gen Z, it can be kind of hard not knowing anything about this new, sudden, very popular corner in the pop culture zeitgeist. And that's where we come in. King Tannic and the Burnett Network have partnered to bring you the best anime and manga related news show on YouTube. The Otaku Experience is your go-to place to find out the biggest stories of the week in the anime and manga industry. Still not convinced? Try the show out for yourself. The show airs Thursdays at 2 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time or 5 p.m. Eastern. The Otaku Experience, only on the Burnett Network.
Observations with Robert Meyer Burnett.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema, and take a deep breath, your evangelist of the imagination, Robert Meyer Burnett, which is still undefined, the existential Mr. Rogers here, and this is ROBSERVATONS episode number 868.5, times 2, whatever you want to call it, because I was rudely interrupted by the powers that be for the last episode of the show, which I'm sorry about, and I'll be turning that con video into a short subject or a ROBSERVATONS close-up on Star Trek's con problem. This is a different show, and I want to start this show by reading something. This is unrelated to the topic at hand, but I read this today on the website The Hill, thehill.com, and I found this to be incredibly disturbing, but not unexpected. Reading for fun. That's right, reading, which I thought was fundamental. Reading for fun plunges to crisis level for U.S. students. This was published or written by Lexy Lonas. Lonas. It was published today at 5:30 a.m. Eastern Time. So what is that, 2:30 a.m. Pacific Time this morning? Amid a cascade of devastating reports showing classroom test scores plummeting nationwide, U.S. students have also hit a record low in their leisure time. Casual reading has collapsed. Only 14% of students say they read for fun every day, according to the National Assessment of Educational Progress report released recently, down 3 percentage points from 2020 and 13 percentage points since 2012. The report indicates 31% of students never or hardly ever read for fun. Experts say the relationship between reading and academic success is crucial at a time when students are facing roadblocks to reading for fun, ranging from social media to not being introduced to books that interest them. We definitely have a crisis on our hands, and what's wonderful is I really definitely think that we have an antidote for what ails us here, says Sasha Quinton, Executive Vice President and President for Scholastic School Reading Events. If we focus on a book, joy, and just connecting kids to funny stories and explosive stories and things that sparked their interest, then they're learning to read and they're on the path to being lifelong readers. The crisis Quinton speaks of has built up through multiple factors, one of the biggest arguably being technology and social media, which is reaching younger and younger children. Common Sense Media reported in 2015 that most children had a phone by the age of 14. In 2022, Stanford Medicine found that the average age had reached 11, a critical point where the love of reading is either nourished or dissipates. It's really important to know what the average age now that kids have their own smartphone is, and we know that we lose our kids around 9, where they stop reading for pleasure. The NAEP report released at the end of June revealed reading scores for the average 13-year-old dropped to their lowest point since 2004. Among the lowest performing students, reading scores were thrown back to levels not seen since before 1971. The importance of letting students choose books that interest them is paramount for experts who say children need to be able to read to relate to the books they want to spend time with them. Maya Doherty, a vice president of academic advocacy focused on literacy at NWEA, a nonprofit research organization, points to tracking by the Cooperative Children's Book Center that shows a lack of diversity in published authors. Of course, that's why. If we take a look at it from a publishing perspective, the books that are even being published reflect a really small percentage of what's available to students that reflect the balance of race, gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and then you layer on top of that the disorder that the national conversation and rhetoric, and I wouldn't even say insistence on book challenges and bans, Doherty said. So all of those things together are not creating strong conditions that would consistently encourage independent reading. Why is it all external forces? The reason kids aren't reading is because they're not reading. Period. It has nothing to do with the diversity of authors. One of my favorite science fiction authors when I was a kid was named Samuel R. Delany. I didn't even know he was black. I just read his books. It didn't matter to me. Although, I will say this, if you want to try reading a book called Dahlgren, I'd love to talk about it. It's a very intimidating book. It's a science fiction novel, but it'll change your life. Book bans have been a hot topic in many Republican-led states that have created processes to make it easier to get titles critics deem inappropriate out of schools. PEN America, a free speech group, recorded a record number of book bans at the beginning of the current school year, with more than 1,500 titles removed from classrooms or school libraries. It is also important to understand the stress and environment children have experienced these past 10 years under the youth mental health crisis, particularly once it was kicked into high gear by COVID. I would think being stuck at home would make everybody a reader. Apparently not. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's Youth Risk Behavior Surveillance System showed in the decade leading up to the pandemic feelings of sadness and hopelessness amongst young people skyrocketed 40%. You know what made me feel better if I felt sad or hopeless as a young person? A fucking book! Horror fiction, Stephen King. Reading some of the great science fiction works of... reading a book, Stephen Whitfield's The Making of Star Trek, which I read 10,000 times when I was a kid. I mean, what the fuck? Seriously, what the fuck? I can't even read the rest of this article. I just wanted to say that 14% of kids, only 14% are reading for pleasure after. And you know why? Because we're fucking dumb. Our culture is being completely dumbed down. The thing about, here's what people don't understand about social media. Social media allows people just to get all the input and make themselves the center of their own universe, and they never have to look at anything that's outside of themselves. But that's the entire point of education, is to look outward. What we are doing is raising an entire generation of kids that don't give a fuck about themselves, anything but themselves. Pardon me, let me say that again. We are raising a whole generation of kids and people that don't give a fuck about anyone but themselves. The whole purpose of education and reading and learning is to look outside yourself at the rest of the world that you're going to have to reside in for the rest of your life. You know, all these problems we're talking about, wow, high admission rates. Let's not let the people into higher education that are actually studying, that are actually reading. Let's get the people that don't want to go to school or don't have the opportunities. I mean, I get it. I'm actually a fan of affirmative action. I think there's a lot of economic factors that play into things. Kids who are incredibly smart have never actually had the opportunity to study, and maybe through affirmative action they finally get a place where they actually can discover themselves. It's not just racial. It's as much economic as it is anything else. Anyway, I digress. But this reading issue, if you watched the last episode of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, did any of those fucking people ever read an allegorical science fiction action adventure story? Because apparently all they watched was Desperate Fucking Housewives, and they decided to watch write Star Trek episodes about that. Jesus fucking Christ. You have 10 episodes to make Star Trek, and you're going to do one where your main character, Spock, we're going to further neuter him by making him human, and then telling a story about his fucking mother-in-law? And then fucking Christine Chapel? That's what Star Trek has become, people. Sorry, I wasn't going to rant. That's the extent of my review of this fucking unbelievably offensive show. And then Akiva fucking Goldsman goes on and disses Amok Time. I can't even. These are people that don't read. Although Akiva Goldsman reads because he needs to figure out who he's going to rip off next. Anyway, not why you tune into this channel. Look, all I can say is that books. There are thousands of books in here, all kinds of books. If you look over there, there's all my film reference books. There's all kinds of things. You know what books have in them? Information you don't know. The thing is, I think most of the people watching this channel are readers. But if you're not, there's a lot of things in books that you don't know that all you have to do is crack open the cover and you'll find them out. It's amazing. It's really depressing. I read this morning when I got up and I was like, God, how depressing. I mean, I haunted my elementary school library when I was 9 years old. Actually, maybe 10. I just turned 10. I joined the Science Fiction Book Club. Why? Because between Star Wars and I had to read the book Logan's Run after I saw the movie when I found out it said based on a book by William F. Nolan and George Clayton Johnson. I was like, George Clayton Johnson? Even at 9, I'm like, that dude wrote Twilight Zone and Star Trek episodes. I got to read that book. You know when I read that book? I read that book because I'm that kind of guy. When I went to Hawaii for Christmas break, Hanukkah break, holiday break, I read Logan's Run at 9 on the beach. Kind of blew my mind, to be honest. But anyway, I didn't know it was about 21-year-olds. Sandman, leave my door. Don't come back here anymore. You know where I got that from? A fucking book. I remember it. I read it when I was 9. Come on, people. You got to encourage people to read. My grandmother bought me books. My aunt, I've told this before, bought me wholly inappropriate horror novels that were full of kinky sex and horrific violence. I even have some of those books. Actually, they're paperback books. Right over there. Same books I got when I was 11. Right here. Awesome. Read chapter 5 of James Herbert's book, The Fog. Change your life. It did when I was 11. Don't get it, man. Why are people not reading? I mean, I can tell people aren't reading when I walk out into the world and listen to the conversations, even in line for Trader Joe's, man. What the fuck? Pick up a book. It'll change your life. Swear to God. Anyway, that's not why you tuned in, though, is it? I wouldn't have tuned into this show if I was going to talk about books. I talk about books enough. No. So there was a couple of Robservations ago, I talked about streaming. And, we are seeing the effects. There was a science fiction movie, people have been talking about it, that was called, I think it's called Crater. And I meant to come around to it, and I couldn't find it. And so if you've heard of it, it was on the Disney Channel. And it was a science fiction movie. And it got, 3.5. But after the death of his father, a boy growing up at a lunar mining colony takes a trip to explore a legendary crater along with 4 of his best friends. Now, I don't know about you. That sounded like catnip to me. I mean, if I was like 8 years old or 9 years old, I would have watched that movie. And it might have been a movie that imprinted on me, kind of like a movie like The Bermuda Depths, which I would never tell anybody is great, but it was something I watched when I was a kid, and it stayed with me. So in Warner Archive, and George Feltenstein and the fellas and girls over at Warner Archive decided to put it out. Not only did they put out the aspect ratio that we saw on TV, they went back and got the international release, 16:9 or 185 version, and put it out on disc. So you can get that. You can get the Bermuda Depths. But you know why? Because you had to see it. They pulled Crater off Disney Plus after 5 weeks because of what it was or wasn't doing. So anyway, I read this great article on Indiewire, and I figured, you know me, if I find the good articles, I have to bring them to all of you. And not only that, but to celebrate the release of Showgirls on 4K domestically, it had a picture of Nomi Malone, your favorite dancer, on doing her thing. Yeah, so Jazz Hands, the bleak future of streaming suggests a world without cult classics? Now, I've talked about this before, how analytic-driven, profit-minded beyond all things, how this could really affect our lives, but this is, let's read this article together. This is by B.J. Colangelo, and this was published on July 11th at 2 o'clock p.m. on, again, /film. An ugly trend has reemerged in the streaming era. Regardless of time, energy, creativity, and passion put into a film or TV series, those in positions of power at film and TV studios can seemingly erase a project out of existence in order to file it as a loss on their taxes. It's especially worrisome considering many of these movies and series aren't given physical or digital releases outside of streaming, given the impression that they've been exiled into nothingness. There are no rogue VHS tapes circulating around secondhand stores just waiting to wind up in the right hands. It's as if we've been thrown back to the 1970s or 80s when a show being canceled often meant there was never any way to see it again. This is a ghastly practice no matter how you look at it, unless you're the type of loser who recreationally brown-noses billionaires on social media, but it also indicates an especially worrying trend in regard to cult films. After the latest announcement of streaming project dumping a viral tweet from Miller Ross directly addressed how these decisions will directly impact the future of cult films. There will never be another cult classic. If your movie or show underperforms, it'll be removed from sight. And that eventual groundswell of support that's turned everything from Blade Runner to Heathers, from disastrous flops to huge successes, we'll never find it. The end. Cult films are the lifeblood of so many cinephiles, and imagining a world without them points to a bleak and sanitized existence. Ross has a point. Streaming apps have become one of the dominant methods of consuming entertainment, effectively killing the rental market and continuing to choke out cable television. Cult classics existed before home video, and certainly before streaming, but we still have to wonder, does the bleak future of streaming suggest a world without new cult classics? I would like to posit something. You know how I always say on this channel that pop culture basically has a half-life of 20 years? Like every 20 years, movies and music and all that become less and less important as new things are made and the modern generations take in what they want to watch. All movies will eventually become cult classics. Enough time that goes by, it doesn't matter. I mean, it might take longer for some movies like 1939 classics like Wizard of Oz or Gone with the Wind to be forgotten. Luckily, they've stuck around. Casablanca has stuck around. But how many films haven't stuck around? And the films that, if you're a cineast or somebody that loves movies, you don't just go watch the great big blockbusters, which, hey, let's be honest, they're awesome. Dead Reckoning is open. You can go see Ethan Hunt crush it. But what happens when you want to see Near Dark? Or you want to go for that double feature of Near Dark and Lost Boys? You know it's hard to find on Blu-ray or anywhere? Near Dark. If you want to go for that quintessential 86-87 vampire double feature, you might be SOL. Unless you come over here, in which case I won't loan it to you. But you can look at my discs of them. Happy to show them to you. But that's because I have them on physical media. And hopefully, Second Sight, the boys over at Second Sight are going to do Near Dark and they're going to do The Hitcher, which would be a great double feature. I got 2 boxes from them today. But anyway, listen. We don't want to lose our great cinematic legacy, and all films will eventually become cult films. It just takes time. And the problem is all of these analytics, bottom-line driven companies don't see the value in what we like to call the long tail. Eventually, all movies will get watched. And if all we're expecting is that the top 10% of content is the only thing that's going to drive viewership, well, that's going to be a terrible, lonely life indeed. What makes a cult film? Look at that. I bet many of you can't tell me what this photograph's from here. Do you know who that is? I'm not going to tell you, but I'm just saying you should know. Critics, theorists, and historians haven't been able to nail down a simple, specific definition of what it means to be a cult film because it's impossible to tag a shorthand explanation to a phenomenon so vast and intricate. The origins date back to when controversial films were suppressed by the powers that be and only kept alive by grassroots film fans and the absolute heroes who refused to destroy prints. There are the obvious cult films that boast devoted fan bases who show up to every single screening and quote every line at the screen, but there are also cult films that exist because they capture a forgotten moment of nostalgia. Cult films that speak to a highly specific lived-in experience and are therefore forgotten by the masses. Cult films that reflect fads of the time period. Cult films whose popularity were sparked ironically. Cult films that have been reassessed in new ways from the time of release. And of course, cult films that appease the hipster need of knowing about a movie before it was cool. I mean, let's if I can give you a shameless plug, 1982, the greatest geek year ever. June of 1982, The Thing and Blade Runner opened on the same day. Both were not successful. Without home video, we might never have seen those movies again. Which is too bad because they're two of the greatest films of 1982, and they have endured and they've probably influenced a hell of a lot more than most movies of their time. But if I had to come up with a definition, this is the author of the article, I'd say that cult films are those that birth a dedicated audience that understands their love of the film exists on the fringe. Like, ooh, you know what's coming out next week? Actually, what's supposed to be out on Tuesday. In the heat of the day, every time you go away, I have to piece my life together. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Kino Lorber. To Live and Die in LA in 4K. We'll see. They haven't sent it to me early. I've been waiting. I go to my porch every day. I got a box from Second Sight today. That made me happy. But where is that elusive 4K? Anyway, how a film consummates that rejection can be a variety of forms, but almost has a you'll know it when you see it vibe. For example, The Big Lebowski was not a financial disaster at the box office, but it can be classified as a cult classic due to the cult-like fandom that surrounds it, including the legitimately recognized religion of dudism. Cult films can both resonate with specific subcultures in society or even develop their own. A great example of this is the love of Brian De Palma's Phantom of the Paradise, a film and personal favorite that was a colossal box office failure in every market, except in Winnipeg, Manitoba, in Canada, where the film is celebrated like it's Star Wars. And it should be. The Heathers Parable, 1988's teen black comedy Heathers, is considered a seminal staple of the teen girl movie genre and has sparked numerous entertainment tie-ins over the last 35 years. The film was given a TV series reimagining in 2018, given the musical theater treatment, which has become one of the most popular shows for community and educational theaters around the country, and continually name-checked in promotional materials for other edgy teen films like Thoroughbreds and most recently, Do Revenge. With such a pedigree, one would think Heathers had the same financial success as a John Hughes movie, but that's not the case. Heathers was famously a box office bomb, earning only $177,247 in its opening weekend and eventually grossing over $1.1 million in the United States over 5 weeks against a $3 million production budget. The film was pulled out of theaters following the short run because it was obvious people weren't going to turn out to see it, but the following year, New World Video put the film out on VHS and Laserdisc, and the film quickly gained a cult following through the home video rental market. Those who had seen the film in theaters quickly spread the word to their friends, and suddenly Heathers was this cool film to enjoy that felt punk rock for loving because it didn't do well in theaters, or just because it was a pro-suicide movie. Suicide, don't do it. Come on, man, that movie's so great. Anywhere you go, you can get a tasty something and feast on a turbo dog. Keeps me sane. Heathers became an embodiment of if you know, you know. The film has become the benchmark of when a cult film goes mainstream because the financial flop has been reevaluated as a classic and certainly made back its budget and then some, even if it took a little longer to do. But had Heathers been tossed into a vault instead of given the home video treatment, none of this would have happened. We would not have Mean Girls without the cult success of Heathers. Absolutely not. How else do films become cult hits? The post-theatrical success story of Heathers is rightfully attributed to the home video market, but it's important to remember that cult films come in many forms, and plenty gained their respective followings without the assistance of a Blockbuster membership card. F.W. Murnau's Nosferatu, which, by the way, Robert Eggers has remade, it's already shot, without the assistance of Blockbuster, was legally supposed to be destroyed at the request of Bram Stoker's estate due to its unauthorized connection to Dracula. But thanks to a handful of surviving prints, the film is now rightfully hailed as a foundational classic. As time went on, many cult films were developed through midnight movie screenings, or when movie theaters would program something a bit off the beaten path, curated by good taste and a love of cinema, instead of whatever the studios were peddling at the time. This is how subversive queer filmmakers like John Waters and exploitation mavens like Russ Meyer were able to thrive. By labeling something a midnight movie, there was an immediate understanding that what you were about to see was special, and likely too much in whatever way that might mean to you for your average moviegoer. Embracing a midnight movie felt like joining a secret club of cinephiles, but also fundamentally changes the way a viewer digests cinema. For example, a film like Cannibal Holocaust is known for its violent depictions of cannibalism, with many audiences treating the film like a litmus test of extreme depravity. A Serbian film says, "Hold my beer." At the same time, the film is not only able to shock by exploiting fears of racism, xenophobia, misogyny, and animal cruelty. Part of the longevity of the film is understanding that it is both transgressive and offensive, and analyzing the ways those truths intersect. Could we even get that today? There's also a communal aspect to cult films, whether literally in the sense of something like the Rocky Horror Picture Show, or even Tommy Wiseau's The Room, but also metaphorically. Until very recently, the mockumentary Drop Dead Gorgeous was relatively hard to come by, which meant finding another person who was a huge fan of the film could instill an immediate kinship between strangers. Make no mistake, streamers are screwing up. The panic is real because what makes the streaming deletion different than a lost reel of film or a VHS tape is that many of these projects exist somewhat in the abstract. Short of a jump drive in someone's office, when these streaming exclusives get removed from streaming platforms, there's no tangible proof that the full completed work still even exists. And it's a shame, because streamers have continually proved to themselves that they're an excellent resource for audiences to find something they didn't know they loved, even if it takes a while. During the lockdown era of the pandemic, a film like Barb and Star Go Vista Del Mar was a godsend thanks to a video-on-demand technology. Had we not all been trapped inside and consuming entertainment as if our lives depended on it, because it did, a film this weird would have probably gone unwatched by the masses. The film only made $32,825 in theatrical revenue, but ended up on a lot of critics' best of the year lists. Additionally, the Netflix Top 10 is proof positive that there's a space for aftermarket appeal through streaming. Any given week, the Top 10 is expectedly filled with new arrivals, but also frequently features some forgotten-about action film from the 2000s. Before streaming, these types of films would play randomly on a Sunday afternoon and inspire your dad to take a break from yard work to watch an action star punch a bank robber or save America, hence Stone Cold, but that's in the early 90s. But now they wind up on the Netflix Top 10 list and inspire legions of film fans to ask, when the hell did Owen Wilson and Pierce Brosnan star in a xenophobic action thriller? TikTok feeds are flooded daily with content creators sharing 3 to 5 minute clips of shows and movies, with comment sections flooded with users asking, "Where can I watch this?" A few months back, I found myself clicking through clips of a show I'd never seen, and I was convinced it was an ad for something new. Nope. It was a 2017 episode of the Netflix show Working Moms, a series I had no idea even existed because of market saturation. But lo and behold, the moment I opened the app, Working Moms was trending. Cult films will prevail. Thankfully, streaming is not the only way we consume media. And as horrific as the trend has been to strip down shows or to strip shows and movies from platforms and drop kick them into the endless void, these projects will never fully disappear. Pirates will become preservationists more than they already are. Laid-off employees will hopefully snag things off hard drives before turning in their parking garage badges. While the days of VHS tape sharing have ended, the process of finding cult films is still the same. It's just evolved. Cult films will always be uncovered in some form. It just won't be the random page on a streaming app the way it has been for the last few years. If there's any justice in the world, the word-of-mouth legends, these hard-to-find films will only inspire more people to seek them out. And perhaps we'll even be lucky enough to see a rise in a director's roadshow where public screenings feel like the carnival is in town. Yes, it's going to be harder. Yes, it's going to mean that the normies who don't actively seek these types of film out will be left in the cold until dedicated enthusiasts get loud enough to make an impact. And yes, it does mean that it will take a lot longer for these seemingly lost films to find their audience. Anyway, that's what I wanted to read. Now, here's the thing. one cult film is one cult film, but a whole channel devoted to cult films, a channel that's promoted as such, a channel that's promoted as being cool, and we have things like that. That's how you save cult films. That's how you save streaming. That's how you save lots of things. And what I worry about in our, it's really interesting. We're now reaching a point of culture where unless it has an immediate return, and I think by getting rid of movies after 5 weeks or something, or 6 weeks like they did in the case of Crater, who knows? That movie might take 6 months to catch on. Like The Thing and like Blade Runner before it, Crater might find an audience. Kids might dig it. I mean, you never know. Maybe Elon Musk will get a rocket to the moon. Maybe Starship will actually land on the moon, and suddenly moon landings are a craze. What's it like to live on the moon? Oh, let's go watch Crater. Oh, wait, we can't. But you never know. And if something is made, it has value most of the time. I mean, there's movies that, let's face it, we all know what they are. But these new projects that don't even get a chance to lift off, you never know what they're going to be. You never know when somebody picks up on them, right? Okay, I'll give you an example. I just watched the terrific Netflix documentary about Wham. What can I say? Hey, everybody, take a look at me. I've got street credibility. I may not have a job, but I have a good time with the boys that I meet down on the picket line. You go, SAG-AFTRA. But if you watch that documentary, there's something very important there. The first single that Wham released was the Wham Rap. It didn't even get in the top 100. They could have been over. Young Guns got up to what? 48, but didn't break the top 40. If they'd given up, if George and Andrew gave up, where would they be? You never know. They get a random call because someone quits Top of the Pops or couldn't make it. Wham gets to go on Top of the Pops, even though if you watch that clip, which you should because it's amazing, and, they sing Young Guns, and suddenly they're at the top of the Pops. And their lives are changed, and we all have Careless Whisper and a different corner to listen to. And George Michael has his solo career. And where would we be without Freedom 90 or Fast Love? I don't know where I'd be. Gotta have faith. All I'm saying is you never know what's going to happen when these things are occurring. Now, cult films, I have literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of what I would consider cult films right around the corner. There's a big shelf right here, but if you go around and you walk in to it's not quite the Criterion Closet, but it's kind of like that, the corridor of cinema, as I like to call it, there's all kinds of things you should look at. Now, with the analytic-driven immediate profit, civilization doesn't work that way. Certainly, art doesn't necessarily work that way. And this idea that, look, I get it, but our lives have to have more than just profit. A lot of the problems that we have, especially in America, we have because there is no immediate return. We have to spend money, a lot of money, but that's our homeless problem is a perfect example. We're not taking care of the mentally ill, and we're not taking care of people that are addicted that are on the streets. Why? Because it's expensive. Who's going to pay for it? Where's the profit? There isn't any. I would say this, there's no immediate economic return, but wouldn't the benefits to society outweigh that at the end of the day? Wouldn't it make our society better? We're literally losing cities. Seattle, Portland, and San Francisco, all kind of, in a way, sister cities, and we're losing them to the same problem. And because there's no profit, immediate economic return in helping your fellow man the way they need to be helped. Same is true of a lot of these movies now. On streaming, they might take a while to find an audience. And do we want to live in a world where we don't have that anymore? I don't. I don't want to live in a world where I went and saw Blade Runner and The Thing opening weekend. I saw Blade Runner first. I saw The Thing and Blade Runner on the same day. I saw Poltergeist the next day. I saw Poltergeist on June 5th because I saw Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan 4 times on June 4th. But you've heard that before, so you don't need to hear it again. But I'll tell you, because if you haven't, check out the documentary, 1984, The Greatest Geek Year Ever. Episode 2 drops Saturday night at 8 on the CW. You can see it again on the CW on Tuesday night at 8, or get the CW app and watch it for free the next day. But yeah, I mean, do we want to live in a world where we don't have those movies? I know you don't, but I mean, that would be a terrible, terrible, terrible thing. So anyway, just a thought, but let's see what you guys are saying, because I got a lot of interesting letters, and you're going to love them. Adoma 5000 became a new member of the channel. Why, thank you, Adoma 5000. Joseph Michael says, after Big Papa Iger's comments on the strike this morning, and with everyone calling him out, should he resign? No, he shouldn't. Because why? Because he's speaking truth to people that need to hear it. That's his truth. He's the head of Disney. He makes $25 million a year or whatever. But the thing is, everybody wants to like equate someone like Bob Iger's salary with a writer that doesn't make that much. You can't. It's not even apples and oranges. It's somebody's talking fruit and he's a vegetable. They're not even in the same genome. So look, what Bob Iger's going to say, he doesn't have to resign. He's beholden to the shareholders. You think the shareholders want Disney to give away money? That's why there's a strike. That's why there's such a problem here. And the problem is the streamers are losing tons of money. Netflix only makes money through subscriptions. And when people are talking to them about residuals, they're like, residuals, our subscriptions have to, that's our only income. That's what pays for everything that's on our platform. It's a very difficult issue. We're in for a long haul. I've heard today that maybe this strike's going to go on till the end of the year, which is already going to fundamentally change even further an industry that is in a state of flux. And that's being kind. Joe, but Big Papa, the answer to that, Big Papa Iger Joseph should not resign. Joe Penora, I mean, if they don't make money, he should resign, but not for making comments about actors and the writers who are on strike, who want to get more money from him. What's he supposed to say? Joe Penora says, I most certainly do tune into this channel for the Trek rants. I'm with you, RMB. Your insight is glorious. Well, you know, it just gets old. I know it gets old, but I mean, ask yourself this. Anybody who's a fan of great science fiction, fantasy, horror, any great, just off the top of your head, think to yourself, what are some great science fiction stories that you really love, that mean something to you? And then you watch, I mean, yeah, they would do comedy. You know what? Since you brought up, Joe, a Trek rant, there were two overtly comedic Star Trek episodes in the original series. There was The Trouble with Tribbles, and there was A Piece of the Action. Okay? The Trouble with Tribbles, funny story about furry balls. I know, Manscaped. But, I mean, the furry balls are different in Trouble with Tribbles. The thing about Trouble with Tribbles was, although it was a funny episode, it still had a story about a potential ecological disaster, and it had the Klingons and the Federation both wanted to control strategic Sherman's planet, and one was trying to develop doing something good for the population. The Klingons were poisoning Quattro Triticale. I mean, there was a very valid allegorical story about a power struggle between two powers in that funny episode. So even though the episode was comedic, there was still a lot to talk about. There was political issues. There was ecological issues, eco-terrorism. There's a lot of interesting stuff. Let's go to the other episode, A Piece of the Action. What was A Piece of the Action about? By the way, these are both second season original series episodes. A Piece of the Action was about a starship, the Horizon, that came to Sigma Iosha, a planet that had a population of people that were very imitative. And what was left behind was a book called Chicago Mobs of the 20s. Written in English, how they learned to read English, I don't know. Maybe they were taught English, but be that as it may, just go with it. Well, they didn't understand, the Iosians didn't understand what the significance or insignificance of this book was. So because of this pollution, the pollution of their culture, this is why we have the Prime Directive, non-interference. Their entire civilization was derailed and turned into what they read in the book Chicago Mobs of the 20s. Imagine an entire planet, and by the way, their own population did this, turned the entire planet of Sigma Iosha into Chicago in the 20s with Al Capone and bootlegging and everything that went along with that. I mean, it's a crazy premise, pretty much a silly premise, but it was an interesting way to delve into what could happen if one culture pollutes another. And we've seen it on Earth for hundreds, if not thousands of years. One culture pollutes another, destroys that culture in the process. And it was about the dangers of such cultural pollution in the context of a science fiction action-adventure allegorical tale. charade, Spock turns fully human. Oh, that's creative. I mean, now I would ask all of you, and there's a lot of people, I like that. I like charade. It was great. I had so much fun. Look, I admit it. There's some good stuff between Spock and his mother, who's hot, but turning Spock into a horn dog who can't help himself. He breaks up with his fiance and he's becoming Christine Chapel's bone daddy by the end of that episode. Really? Is that Spock? And by the way, is that a Star Trek? They have 10 Star Trek episodes to make in Strange New Worlds a season, and that's what they want to make? I mean, that's basically a bottle show too, which means they use their standing sets. Well, it's no Doomsday Machine. Really? Like, there's a bottle episode. Is that what we want from Star Trek? Really? Oh, my mother-in-law is coming. Uh-oh. I have a wacky problem I have to save her from knowing about so I don't get into trouble. Who wrote this shit? This is not a science fiction allegorical action adventure series that has something. I mean, you could see that story. Okay, maybe your main character is not going to turn into a human being from being a half human, but it's a mother-in-law tale, a tale of your mom. I would say go watch the original Star Trek episode from the first season, This Side of Paradise. It basically has the same trope. Spock, Leela Kalomi, an Earth woman that's been in love with him for a very long time, unrequited love. Spock gets zapped by spores, by the plant spores, and all of his inhibitions fall away, and he gets to frolic in the fields with Jill Ireland, not a bad person to frolic with. But there is a maturity level in that episode that is light years beyond what we saw. And I understand people can like charade all they want. I didn't. I'm tired of this dumbed down, immature, let's make Spock a buffoon. Let's play the same tropes. Let's turn him into something he's not in every episode. It's infuriating. Spock used to be a really smart character. I mean, if ever I thought that he couldn't wait. Oh, his wife, his betrothed, takes off, and he just goes to Christine. I mean, Christine Chapel pays him a booty call. I like someone else. I mean, really? That whole episode led up to him fucking Christine Chapel. It started out with the what the fuck, and it ended with the oh fuck. Yeah, boom, chicka boom, bow. I mean, I fucking hate that shit. Anyway, what was I talking about? Cult movies? Scott Bartholomew said the emasculation of Spock is unconscionable. Even though he's being emasculated, but he's certainly dipping his wick. You think Spock manscapes? I wonder. I bet he does. Vulcans probably don't have much hair. Does it matter? I don't care. Tom Jr. Jackson says, I sent you an article in your Twitter DM. It might make for a good Robservation. Also, folks, read a damn book. Crater was not a bad movie. There you go. Yeah, I didn't see it. Mikey Lito says, evening, Bobby. Do you own Costa-Gavras' Missing? I had the Laserdisc. I never loved that movie. I liked that movie. I didn't love it. But that was one of those things that was always at the video store. The first time I saw Missing was on VHS, and it was always at the video store. And I had the Laserdisc. BA says, I totally random, but I ended up watching The Wraith today. Definitely a cult film. It was so much fun. Sherilyn Fenn's in The Wraith. Of course, Charlie Sheen. It's got one of the cool cars of 80s cinema in it. Yeah, The Wraith is definitely a cult movie. I don't think it's great. It's good, though. I saw The Wraith in the theater. But it's good. Irene Jobson says, Rob, thank you. Because of you, my 8-year-old is reading right now. Well, I hope he's not reading because he watched this stream with you. But Scott Bartholomew said, I just watched A Scanner Darkly, and it was awesome. Well, you should read the book now. It's pretty good. I like A Scanner Darkly. I thought it was pretty good. Let's see. Oh, you know what? Somehow, I just realized that even in the my Stream Elements has now started once again putting my super chats and tips together. Bo Nehr says, Bo Nehr. That's funny. I see what you did there. That's Bo with last name Nehr is actually kind of funny. Bo Nehr. If I met somebody named Bo, what's your last name? Nehr. I'd be like, that's a cool name. Thoughts on Secret Invasion series as a whole? I have to say, I'm enjoying it. I read the scripts. It's pretty much the scripts. My only criticism with Secret Invasion is I do think the direction's rather flat. I mean, I think the action scene in last night's episode the end scene was pretty good, but there aren't a lot of peaks and valleys in terms of the episodes go along. I mean, I think it's definitely a worthy show. It's serious. I just wish it had higher highs than it does, unfortunately. But I'm enjoying it. Terry Henderson subscribed to the channel. Jared Fullingham subscribed to the channel. Apollo 684 subscribed. Acker and Zuda. That's a cool name. And Joshua Clay Black has subscribed to the channel. Thank you for that. I very much appreciate that. Let's see. Zachary Zabayle says, do you remember the movie I Come in Peace? Yeah. Okay, I Come in Peace, not a great movie. I mean, in terms of sci-fi action movies, it's not horrible. Not horrible. But it's not so bad. You know what? I want to say, did Craig Baxley... I have to find out if Craig Baxley... Am I remembering this wrong? No, I must be wrong. It is! Okay, Craig Baxley did direct I Come in Peace. Why did that stick out in my mind? Because Craig Baxley directed Stone Cold. And, yeah. The Word Balloon Podcast says, John Suntress, and if you don't listen to John Suntress's The Word Balloon Podcast, why don't you? Shame on you. He's one of the greatest broadcasters to ever come out of Chicago. Why don't you? He says, I got screwed by the SAG strike. I was going to MC panels with Una, Riker, Weyoun, Dax, and Garrick. Canceled at Terrificon. They will autograph a photo, but no interviews. That's interesting. I mean, if you're going to a convention, you're not really promoting something. You're promoting something that you did in the past. I mean, is that? I guess they say that you can't do that. Is that part of that? That's interesting. I mean, to talk about things, I don't know. That's a bummer. I mean, I don't know how it's going to affect Comic-Con. What a bummer. Mark Altman was going to do a writers panel, which he's been doing for a long time. That's very cool. Joe Penora says, do you consider Leon a cult movie? Well, if you want to be the version, Leon is kind of a cult movie in America because we have The Professional, because they edited a lot out of that movie because people were uncomfortable with the relationship between Matilda and Leon. So the Leon movie, the Leon version of the movie is my favorite version of the movie. And I guess you could call it a cult movie. But I would say, look, I mean, Leon, obviously Luc Besson directed it, and it came out on the heels of The Femme Nikita, which was an international hit. So I would say that Leon, at first, probably wasn't a cult movie. But now it kind of is. You know? I love Leon. Everyone. I love Leon. It's great. And I have an action figure of Leon. So, Jonathan Namila sends in a tip and says, Rob, what are your thoughts on the historical actors strike today? It's historical. I mean, look, here's the entertainment business, because of the sea change that is streaming and the way we are consuming our media, the way the entire media landscape is changing. This kind of thing is inevitable, and the way that business was done in the past is going to change. I don't know necessarily for the better, but it's going to change. I mean, for me, I've been stuck sort of in the indie film world, and you try and get as much money up front as you can to do the job at hand. The only thing that I've constantly received residuals from is the Crisis Medicine series that I helped co-create, that my friend Mike Schertz does, this medical lecture series. You can find it online if you go to Crisis Medicine, the website, and it is a website. It is designed to provide pre-hospital care if you ever find yourself in an active violent event, like a school shooting or a bombing or something. It's morbid, but residuals are great. But I think we're going to be living in a world for a while where I don't know if they're how does Netflix give residuals if all they get is subscriptions? And when you have people watching, if one show is way more successful than another, they still have to pay for all of their shows via subscriptions. So it's a tough one. I don't know. Thomas Bartoli says, Rob, you got my 10 out of 10 for the Spock getting banged and reading rainbowish rant. Well, thanks, Thomas. I appreciate that. Thanks for the super chat. Is that Tach Art? Tach Art? Is that Tach Art? Or is Tach is less than 3? I've seen your Nerve shirt before. Oh, yes. So I'm guessing you're an Ava fan. How do you feel about the rebuild of Ava movies? I think Thrice Upon a Time was a wonderful finale to the franchise and a beautiful movie with a great theme of letting go of the past. I got to tell you, Tach, that, you know what? When I saw the trailers for that, I'm like, this movie looks fucking bonkers. It did not disappoint. I love Evangelion. You know, it's an interesting anime. It's one of my favorite animes. I think the 4 movies are great, and they're weird, but why shouldn't they be? If you guys haven't seen Evangelion or Evangelion, Ava, I would say Evangelion, you should. I know they're anime, but they're really interesting. And hey, man, it's giant robots fighting interesting creatures named angels. And, you know, there's an extinction around every corner. Let's see. But yeah, where is my Nerve shirt? I have a Nerve refrigerator magnet, and I don't know where my Nerve shirt is. And that's one of my favorite shirts. I want to get another one. Scott Batholomew says, remember when Star Wars stayed in theaters over a year? Yes. I do. Seattle was one of the cities where Star Wars stayed in one theater for over a year, and Empire as well. I do. And I like those days. I thought that was great. Charles David Atkins says, do you think Lex would be made today? It was so wild in the 90s. No, we are I think part of the problem is people aren't reading. You know, especially genre fiction. I mean, I have to tell you, some of the greatest sex and violence in terms of entertainment, some of the best bread and circuses that I've ever come across are in books. I mean, nothing beats a great sex scene. There's a 3-way between 2 guys and a girl in Bret Easton Ellis's Glamorama. That's one of the hottest scenes I've ever read anywhere, and it's in a Bret Easton Ellis novel. That guy knew what's up. I mean, you know, it's that scene was smoking hot. And by the way, if you haven't read Glamorama, Bret Easton Ellis's Glamorama, why don't you? That book has never been adapted into a movie, even though I thought Roger Avery had the rights for a while. That book should have, because they've ripped off the idea of fashion models as terrorists, or fashion models as cannibals, or fashion models as any number of different things. But Glamorama, that did it first. And you know what? I read that. It's a book. It's a great book. I have my first edition right up there with all the rest of my Bret Easton Ellis books. Bret Easton Ellis's books. Jeremiah Bailey says, ironically, due to the fragmented ways people consume via Netflix, theater, cable TV, etc., all films are cult to some degree. Yes, I said that. The Flash may be the first big-budget superhero cult film of this era. Amen, Jeremiah Bailey. I think The Flash is, although I would go back further, and I would say that Barbarella, in terms of Dino De Laurentiis and European, I mean, you could go back. Modesty Blaze, not a great film, unfortunately. Modesty Blaze, Barbarella, and Diabolic. I think those are 3 60s European comic book movies. I mean, people don't even know. People, like, you talk comic book movies, and I go, the first comic book movies that come to my mind when I think of comic book movies, besides like the Batman serial or the Adventures of Captain Marvel serial from the 40s, the first time I think comic book movies, I think of that trilogy. I think of Danger Diabolic, Barbarella, and Modesty Blaze. Those are the first comic book movies that I think about. And those aren't even the first comic book movies that got made. Most fans of the comic book movie genre, because they're not, I mean, Diabolic's kind of a superhero, Barbarella, I guess. But those are the first ones I think of. Nobody thinks about those. I mean, they do, but I would say that trilogy is the first the first trilogy of cult films. Joe Penora says, ever see Vincent Gallo's Brown Bunny? Yeah, because I had to see Chloe Sevigny give Vincent Gallo a blowjob. So, wait, what? Yeah, that's in the movie. For real. She did it. I would say, yeah, I saw Vincent Gallo's Brown Bunny in a theater. Woohoo! Ron H. said, dude, I hope you ain't been taking any of that polydichlorotic euthymol. That shirt tells me you might be, laugh out loud. Somebody knows that. Somebody knows what Con-Am 27 is. I mean, for all of you out there, this might be a cult. It wasn't a cult movie when it came out. People are probably thinking this is some Pride shirt. It is. I take pride in Peter Hyams' 1981 Outland, starring Sean Connery on Jupiter's moon. He's the only law. Yes, nice. I like that you called that out, son. Music Sustains Me says, my name is Robert Byron Burnett, and I love today's episode of Strange New Worlds. It made a ton of sense and in no way contradicted itself. It's true, my music sustained me. You know me so well. Scott Batholomew says, Phantasm was a great cult film. You know what's interesting? When Phantasm came out, I wouldn't have called it a cult movie because it was in the pages of Fangoria. I saw Phantasm on Saturday. My dad took me to see Phantasm in the theater. That was the same day that I bought the Kenner Millennium Falcon for the Star Wars figures. I went to Crossroads Cinema, and then afterwards I went to World of Toys. I'd saved up money. I said, Dad, you got to take me to the toy store. He's like, why? I go, I'm buying the Kenner Millennium Falcon that I used to call every day and ask for like a year. Did you get it in yet? It's kind of like being a Jazz Inc. customer now. But it's Phantasm is, I think, a cult movie now, which is interesting because at the time, I think that especially genre cinema. Look, Outland was a huge sci-fi movie when it came out. It was also one of the first movies that used the Introvision process, which was an in-camera compositing effects process that was pioneered by a guy named Tom Nod. He started this company, Introvision. You saw it like in the train scene when the kids are crossing the train in Stand By Me. It was wiped out of existence not long after. I mean, it lasted about a decade. But Outland was the big claim to fame that was the first big Introvision movie. You know, you had Peter Boyle and Francis Sternhagen, and, of course, you had Sean Connery. Outland was a big sci-fi movie. Now, total cult movie. Nobody remembers Outland, even science fiction fans. It amazes me, to be honest. It amazes me that these big studio science fiction movies that I was really looking forward to in the early 80s, no one remembers. Altered States. Altered States was a huge movie for me. Outland comes out a year later. Huge movie. 1983's Brainstorm, directed by Douglas Trumbull, who did all the effects in Blade Runner. That was a huge movie for me. You know? The Last Starfighter's kind of culty now. When it came out, it wasn't. Jeff Messerman. Messerman says, pessimism off the charts. Fiction and novels might be the only escapism left standing. The cinema, it's over. I'm an otherwise cheery bloke, I promise. Jeff, you and I park our shuttlecrafts in the same shuttle bay. I agree with you 100%. Books are amazing. Science fiction novels, it's incredible to me how, when I was growing up, you had to be if you wanted to go to a convention and meet like-minded people, you had to have at least read the 25 best science fiction novels at the time. People just expected you read Dune. People just expected you read Stranger in a Strange Land, that you read the Foundation at the time trilogy. You've read The Demolished Man, or you'd read The Martian Chronicles or Dandelion Wine or The Illustrated Man or Something Wicked This Way Comes. That's a little Ray Bradbury. I mean, it was just expected. You'd read, when you joined the Science Fiction Book Club, you had Dangerous Visions and again Dangerous Visions and read all those stories that Harlan Ellison had found. Everyone had read Repent. I bet if I asked you right now, and this is not a criticism. When I was a kid, the coolest title of a short story, because I hadn't read, anyway, I'd only read the short story before I'd read other books. The coolest title of any story I ever read was Repent, Harlequin, said the TikTok man. Go find that story and read it and love it. It's great stuff. Zachary Zabayle says, what movie? Scene 1, scientist jogs and turns, stops to walk. Scene 2, scientist wrist gadget throws dragon in the air to fight magic villain's dragon. I don't know. I have no idea what that is. It doesn't ring a bell. Scientist jogs and turns to stop to walk. I don't know. I might not have seen that movie. That doesn't mean it's not good. Or I might know it and I'm just not thinking along the right lines. Anonymous sends in a tip and says, are there any movies that didn't click for you until you saw it in theaters? I saw 2001 A Space Odyssey in 70mm and I finally got it. The pacing and story choices finally clicked for me on the big screen. I now see why people love it so much. Oh, it's just Tach, by the way. Oh, Tach, okay. Well, yeah, okay. That's a really interesting... So 2001 A Space Odyssey... It was specifically made to be seen in a theater. And when Stanley Kubrick made that movie, you know, I'm sure he never thought to himself it would ever be shown on television. Because it doesn't work. I mean, watching 2001 is like being at it's more of a tone poem. It's more like an art installation than a movie. And I agree with you. The only reason, the first time I saw 2001, really, I'd seen it on TV, but it was not, I was too young. But I saw 2001 in a theater I was 11 or 12, and it blew my mind. I saw it at the Cinerama in Seattle on this huge, gigantic screen. And there's movies like that, and I would say Apocalypse Now is another movie that you can watch it. You can get the home video and watch the 4K disc is beautiful. All 3 versions beautiful. But if you see it in a theater, because these movies were conceived to be seen larger than life on a screen, on a big screen. Even, it's interesting, because even if you go back and you watch a lot of the exploitation films of the 70s, they were made, like when we had the direct-to-video movies, movie making got really bad. I mean, I'm not saying movie making wasn't bad before that, low-budget stuff, because it was. But there was a different, when you know a movie's going to be on a theater screen, blown up big, it was different. Once people knew that movies were going to be direct to video or something, there was a level of quality you could escape with. But look, I think every movie is made better seeing it on a big screen, no matter what it is, as long as it was originally intended to see. I think that there was nothing that, because I saw most movies in theaters because I was such a movie fan, so I got to see so many movies in theaters beforehand. For me, I was there at the dawn of the home video age, so I had seen most things before they came out on video. There were only a very few things that and also I went to a lot of revival screenings, even starting in when I was 10, 11 years old. I was taking the bus and going to see movies at revival houses in Seattle, out in the U District, like at the Neptune Theater. So I saw a lot of famous movies on the big screen. Scott Batholomew says, took your recommendation and read Replay by Ken Grimwood. Total badass. Right? I mean, here's the thing, man. Though you read these books, like Replay is one of these books. I would not recommend a book unless I thought it was a genre book, especially, unless I thought the book was delicious. Now, I mentioned Samuel Delaney's Dahlgren. Dahlgren, admittedly, is, if you like Andrei Tarkovsky movies, Dahlgren will be your jam. But if you don't, perhaps not. Replay is one of those novels that you tear through. It's so much fun to read. The story's fun. Everything about that book is fun. You can't go wrong reading Replay. You can't. Okay. Now I have a letter that I've been wanting to read for a couple days now. I think it's really interesting. Now, people keep asking me about The Sound of Freedom, the Jim Caviezel movie about child trafficking, that people are saying, oh, it's a QAnon thing because Jim Caviezel believes in QAnon and all that. Look, is it a QAnon movie? It's about child trafficking, which is happening a lot in the world. Anyway, we talked about this on a couple of Midnight Musings ago. And I got a great, really thoughtful letter sent in, and I want to read it. So here we go. And it's about the sound of freedom. It's a long letter, but I think it's thought-provoking, so check this out. Hey, Rob, I just listened to your recent Midnight Musings where Sound of Freedom was brought up. There was discussion about it being tied to QAnon and that the movie had nothing to do with, which is true as far as content goes, but there are other controversies the national media hasn't picked up on about Tim Ballard, who the movie's about, or his organization, OUR, Operation Underground Railroad. Being from Utah, where this charitable organization resides, I wanted to shed some more light on why many people in Utah, myself included, feel this organization does more harm than good. I'm glad Sound of Freedom has been released because it puts a focused spotlight on OUR, Operation Underground Railroad. OUR has been running for 10 years now, and it is filed as a charitable organization. Big fundraisers are held for this organization under the alluring and certainly virtuous mission of rescuing children from sex slavery, and many members of the Mormon Church, of which I'm a member, have strong love for this organization because of its mission objective. However, it is not without its very glaring problems, and I'm going to include some quotes from various newspapers and magazines. And he very thoughtfully provided these quotes, the sources that he got these from, and I will include these sources. Here's the first. It's a New York Times article, and let me read it. In February 2016, according to a court filing, a Justice Department official cautioned members of the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, or ICAC, a national network of federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies, against being involved in, assisting, or supporting operations with Ballard's group. Captain Michael Edwards, the commander of the Washington branch of the task force, relayed the message to state and local police in an email. According to Edwards, the Justice Department official stressed that OUR had no affiliation with the task force and that no task force group should partner with OUR or provide OUR with any resources, equipment, or personnel training. A journalist whom I respect greatly was involved on one of their missions, or jumps, in 2014. And again, this was in Slate, and I'm going to put that here in the chat so you can read it. There you go. And here's what the author said. She writes about it here and the problems she had with OUR, including Tim Ballard placing her in the middle of a sex trafficking raid, which she was tricked into doing. He had told her he'd keep her safe outside and she was to keep kids calm when he gave the signal, but instead called her inside before initiating the raid, guns drawn. In her article, she writes, Ballard's aggressive sureness began to scare me. Ann Gallagher, whom the U.S. State Department called the leading global expert on the international law and human trafficking, published an essay critical of OUR's tactics. She argued its raids showed an alarming lack of understanding about how sophisticated criminal trafficking networks must be approached and dismantled, and called OUR's operations arrogant, unethical, and illegal. Ballard sent the article to me and called her a bitch. Then he asked me to write a rebuttal. Ballard did not respond to the detailed questions about his comments. I had nothing of worth to say in response to a woman who dedicated her life to this work. How could he think I did? I didn't write the piece. She continues, in 2015, a Silicon Valley man funded a sting with $40,000 and watched it happen in real time. With the help of OUR, a rich person can become a vigilante hero for the day, their living room transformed into a personal situation room. For those who can't afford the situation room, Ballard carries the drama with him to every interview and every fundraiser. That drama and a real desire to save children moves a lot of donors, whether or not it's accurate. Vice recently investigated a few of Ballard's stories and found a pattern of image burnishing and mythology building, a series of exaggerations that are, in the aggregate, quite misleading, and has detailed disturbingly amateurish operations like the one I attended. The children saved in the aforementioned raid were saved for only a week. OUR deposited them with a group that did not have the capacity for them and released them within the week. As this journalist writes, all those kids in 2014 got from us was a soda and a swim, and Ballard came out ahead in the deal. Ballard's raids provide the thrill and the moment of success, but many don't see these children as being saved. From the New York Times article linked above on an operation carried out here in the U.S., It was not possible to independently verify Hour's claim of 4,122 rescues or the 31 by the State Patrol. The identities of children are protected in sex offender crimes. Among these 271 net nannies arrests was able to verify, however, none involved physical contact with a real child. Martina Vandenberg, the president of the Human Trafficking Legal Center, a national organization that trains lawyers to provide pro bono services to victims of real-life trackers, is critical of operations like Net Nanny. These stings are tricking guys into showing up, she says. Law enforcement can get dozens like a conveyor belt, and when you see who's arrested, it's kind of pathetic. In states where prosecution numbers are low for actual human trafficking, what a godsend, but you've not helped release one victim or child. My feeling is that they should be doing real cases with real children. Those restrictions to verification are here in the U.S. In third world countries where the more expensive operations happen, no verification is available. Little to no knowledge is provided by Hour about where their victims go or how they're treated. In a 2020, an investigation into Hour was begun by the Davis County Attorney's Office here in Utah for communications fraud, witness tampering, and retaliation against a witness, victim, or informant. By the way, I'm going to put this link in the... I really appreciate how meticulous this letter is written. So thank you for that. I very much appreciate being able to put these in the chat because I knew nothing about Ballard. I've been watching a few interviews with him, and this is the first time I was made aware of him. Several people familiar with the investigation had said potential charges could revolve around whether Operation Underground Railroad and its founder had misled donors and the public about the nature of its work and rescue operations. Its total revenue, as reported by the IRS, is above $47 million. The investigation ended earlier this year with this statement. In sum, the Davis County Attorney's Office does not believe that the decision to pursue charges against Hour or any individuals associated with Hour is prudent. While not charged, Tim Ballard continues to face increasing scrutiny here in Utah. There's a nice summary of controversies this organization faces on Wikipedia. I'll provide it here. I've included the linked sources here as well. A September 2020 Vice News article called Hour a QAnon-adjacent charity and said the organization has embraced followers of that particular baseless conspiracy theory rather than condemning it the way other anti-trafficking charities have. Even though the organization emphasized no association with the group, Ballard stated to the New York Times, some of these theories have allowed people to open their eyes, so now it's our job to flood the space with real information so the facts can be shared. In a December 2020 article, Vice News said that Tim Ballard embellished Hour's role in the rescue of a trafficked woman, stating that they did not find outright falsehoods, but a pattern of image burnishing and mythology building, a series of exaggerations that are in the aggregate quite misleading. A 2021 follow-up article further criticized Hour's practices, including using inexperienced donors and celebrities as part of its jump team, a lack of meaningful surveillance or identification of targets, failing to validate whether the people they intended to rescue were in fact actual trafficking victims, and conflated consensual sex work with sex trafficking. Hour reportedly consulted a psychic for intelligence on one mission on the border between Haiti and the Dominican Republic. Ann Gallagher, the leading global expert on the international law and human trafficking, wrote in 2015 that Hour had an alarming lack of understanding about how sophisticated criminal trafficking networks must be approached and dismantled. Anyway, he went on because he's repeated that. Now, I realize this is a YouTube show for all things movies and entertainment. So to bring this full circle, Rob, Sound of Freedom did beat Indiana Jones at the box office for a day. A remarkable feat. 2.6 million of its proceeds were actually donated tickets, which, if factored out, puts Indiana Jones back in the lead. I didn't know that. And it looks like a great movie. The national media narrative around it has unfortunately been sparse aside from QAnon links, and I wanted to provide a more fleshed out picture. I hope people enjoy the movie, but I personally advise anyone from being involved with the organization Hour. Thanks, Rob, and I love your content. That comes to us from Daniel. Well, first of all, Daniel, listen, I think that your message here, I really appreciate that you're telling people, you're encouraging people to go see the movie. Look, even movies that are based on true stories are based on real people. Obviously, we know that it's always best to read books and delve into the history of those people before you buy into the myth that a movie is giving you. The heart is deceitful above all things. You know, J.T. Leroy. Look into that story. You just never know with people. I think the idea of child trafficking and sex trafficking is horrible. It's happening worldwide. It's happening more often than we probably ever have it happen before. And the way people can access other people through the internet is terrible. So I really appreciate you writing in. I think that's really cool, and I very much appreciate the hipping us to that. One of my new favorite people, the Science Lady, Tracy, the Science Lady, writes in and says, "Hi, Rob. I've just watched the trailer for Napoleon, and I think the visuals look great. As you know, I've been excited to see this movie. Vanessa Kirby is Josephine, but I have some concerns with Joaquin Phoenix. He's one of my favorite actors. I share the same philosophies as he does with regards to animal welfare, climate, environment, etc. You know what I read today? I read that the ocean around Florida was 97 degrees. Gosh, if you didn't think climate change was real, boy, we're certainly going to find out, aren't we? Hate to be critical, however, he would have been in his 20s when some of this would have been happening. He was vigorous and fit. I didn't see that in the trailer. He died approximately at 50 years old. Should also be noted that Josephine was older than him. It could still be a great movie, and Phoenix is a fantastic actor, and my worries could be for naught. I would love to hear what Elizabeth and her family think of the trailer. They're going to know more about Napoleon than myself. It would be interesting to see if this is their Napoleon. I've always found him to be interesting. Whether he wanted to modernize Paris, when he wanted to modernize Paris, everyone was against him, but he saw the future of how a city should be and knocked lots of medieval houses. Even though they were historically important, he built massive wide roads, and then, of course, the Arc de Triomphe. He was a fascinating character. I want the movie to succeed. One of the better biology modules I took was forensic archaeology, and we looked at mass graves on the sites discovered had Napoleon soldiers, which was investigated by my teacher. So I'm 100% interested in the film, but I have just one tiny worry. I see what you did there. Napoleon quotes that I like. The truest wisdom is a resolute determination. Religion is what keeps the poor from murdering the rich. In politics, stupidity is not a handicap. And hope you have a fantastic week. Although I don't think that's what Napoleon said. Hope you have a fantastic week. Much love, Science Lady. Well, Science Lady, my love is right back. Actually, I should say it this way. My love is right back at you. Thanks for the great letter. Appreciate that. And there's a couple of there's some more. Science Lady just sends me oh, this is a great one. She just sent me an article read. She goes, I know you like to read weird science articles. Try this. Oh, I got to put this. I haven't even read this article, but I got to put this in the chat. This looks like a banger, people. And if it's coming from Science Lady, you know she knows what's up. There you go. Science Lady, this article, check this out. This article, I won't read it because I haven't read it before. Is it ethical to use complex mini-brains for artificial intelligence? Brain organoids could be more effective than silicon-based AIs at certain tasks. But as they grow more complex, should we step in to protect their welfare? Oh my God. Wow, I'm not subscribed to the New Scientist, but wow, that's... See, we're living in such an interesting world, and you know what? The people who aren't reading are not enjoying how interesting the world is that we live in. Here's another thing that Science Lady says. Hi, Rob. Were you being serious about me putting out a podcast regarding sex with aliens? Come on, Science Lady. Yes. The answer is yes. I can do it for you if it was. Yes, absolutely. My main area is paleobiology, evolution, physiology, marine biology, and anything to do with ecology. I would have to get the research done, write a script, but I knew nothing about vlogs or video editing, only podcasts. At the moment, I'm getting the research ready, and I'm writing a script for a podcast about the Jurassic world. I'm determined to try and go to Glastonbury next year. The plan is to hire a camper van for a few days. I'm not one for camping, especially in the mud. Also, I believe you're going to a festival soon. You need to take photos. I'm going to Comic-Con next week. I'll take photos. I want to party with you, Science Lady. Let's go. Glastonbury, come on. I'd go. Camper van, count me in, man. Yeah. Science Lady. Somebody's got to write me the lyrics. Who sings a Green-Eyed Lady? What's the name of it? Here, let me find out. Let's see. Green. Somebody already knows this. I'm sure Mikey Lito knows this. Why do I not know this right away? Because it's not somebody you would know. Sugarloaf. That's right, Sugarloaf. Sugarloaf sings Green-Eyed Lady. Somebody has to, let me put this video in the, so I want somebody to write me the lyrics instead of Green-Eyed Lady. Write me the lyrics to a song called Science Lady, and we'll record it. We can make it the official theme song of ROBSERVATONS, because that would be great. Eileen Jobson says, is Science Lady real? Is anyone real on the internet? I suspect we already know who Science Lady is, but why ruin the fun? If it's who I think it is, I love Science Lady. She knows her comic books, too. So anyway, yeah. Rubin A Hilbers writes in. Rubin A Hilbers says, who I think should buy Prodigy? The Firestarter band? No, I know what you're saying. Igor, just dial the brain probe up to 11. What do you mean the dictaphone is already on? Oh, blast. Electrical crackle buzzing. Hi, Rob. I know it's been a while since I've written in. And no, I've not been running diabolical experiments in my basement. Anyway, I'm glad we were able to settle our misunderstanding about Picard Season 3, which, for the record, was great. But get to the title of this letter. I think this is a chance for NBC to get a major whammy on Paramount+. To begin with, they saved Magnum P.I. and gave it a wrap-up season, the second half of which they have in the can and ready to go. On top of that, production on Season 2 of the Quantum Leap revival started in February. If they wrote a few scripts ahead of time and then wrote the rest during production, there's a fair chance that is complete as well. If I was NBC, I would buy Prodigy and add it to the lineup. Then when the time comes and those shows air on NBC, NBC can basically go, yeah, we know there's a strike, but we've got our act together, unlike Paramount Plus, who are falling apart to the point that we had to save 2 of their shows. Thoughts? Regards, Rubin A. Hilbers. Well, you know what? It'd be really funny if NBC bought Prodigy, because NBC, say it with me now, originally aired Star Trek. So, yeah, let's do that. Let's put Star Trek back on NBC. I approve this message. I think it's great. And why not? Why not? So, I'm in. Totally in. Let's see. The movie was 1984's Dungeon Masters, says Zachary Zabayle. That's what he was asking about. That's pretty interesting. Scott Batholomew says, Otoy needs to produce work during the strike. I agree with you. I totally agree with you. That would be great if they could. Irene Jobson says, I dream about living. That's good, because the dreams in which I'm dying are the best I've ever had. For all you fans of The Hurting, which is one of the great goth albums no one thinks is a goth album. They don't know, but we know, right? We know. Dan Candy says, Yo, Rob, could a John Barry score have salvaged License to Kill? Ooh, well, it might have made it better. I'm not a License to Kill fan. I think it's a Bond it's fairly cheap. They made most of it in Mexico. Not that was a bad thing. It just, you know what? Look, to me, License to Kill was one of the first times, well, it was Live and Let Die was a response to blaxploitation. Mouth Golden Gun had a little bit of martial arts in it. License to Kill was a Miami Vice episode. I mean, for better or worse, you know. So I don't know if it could salvage it, but I don't know. Our friend Sonny Dominguez says, definitely going to check out the Free Enterprise panel at San Diego Comic-Con. Gathering afterwards, yes. So for those who don't know, next Thursday, the 20th of July, there is at 4 o'clock in the afternoon a Free Enterprise panel where I will be on it. Mark Altman will be on it. Rafer Weigel, who plays me in Free Enterprise, will be there. Celebrating, oh my God, the film's 25th anniversary. So that's terrifying. So yes, we will definitely have some kind of a gathering afterwards. I promise. And it'll be fun. It'll be loads and loads of fun. Scott Bartholomew says, the Blacklist finale was bullshit. I didn't see it. Is that the series finale? Is it over? I thought it would be bullshit too. Yeah. Kenneth Colton says actors definitely deserve to get fair treatment, although it's sad to hear production on some of our most anticipated films, like Deadpool 3, have shut down. Hey, I'll tell you something. This could be good, because remember, they've shot a lot of Deadpool 3, and they'll go right into the edit bay. So they might not be shooting anymore, but they can refine it. Might help them make the story better. They might have an indication about where they're going. So any movies that have already been shot, they just go into editorial earlier. And if the strike drags on a long time, well, that's a bummer. But yeah. Matt Tuween sends in a super chat and says, Strange New Worlds even made T'Pring's father a buffoon. What the fuck? Look, these writers, the fact that they treat anybody and there's a thing about modern Star Trek that they actually, like, somebody got pissed at me and was calling me a member of the fandom menace and saying, you think all strong female characters are I'm like, what the fuck? When I was complaining in my Star Trek video, in the short take with the Tribbles from Discovery, and then the first episode where they introduce Pike and the Enterprise in the second season of Discovery, they introduce in both of these, they introduce a female captain that is fed up with this older white dude officer. And if you watch that episode, by the end, he gets killed. And the way she treats him is abhorrent. It's anti-Star Trek. It's anti-human. And they introduce, an asshole Star Trek character that works for Pike that's from his Enterprise. And they introduce this insufferable character and make him horribly insufferable to kill him later in the episode. And they're killing him to comedic effect. This is in Star Trek. Star Trek is so far away. People, look, I understand from a casual viewpoint, and all the people, I like Strange New Worlds. I'm happy you like Strange New Worlds, and I know that there's certain longtime fans that do that there's an element of fandom that'll always buy into the funny, oh, this was cute, all this. I take Star Trek way too seriously, and I admit it. But I can't deal with the flippant, glib bullshit that modern Star Trek is full of. And when Akiva Goldsman's complaining about Amok Time, fuck you, Akiva Goldsman. What have you ever... you'll sit there, okay, A Beautiful Mind. When have you ever written anything that was science fiction, fantasy, and horror that people will hold up as being great? Lost in Space, I Am Legend, although I do like I Am Legend, but that's because Francis Lawrence did a good job directing it. You certainly didn't know how to handle the creatures, though, did you? Did you, Akiva? Come on, dude. Ugh. 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 Anyway, you don't want to hear me bitch and moan and complain. So, okay, I want to offer a counterpoint. Our good friend Glenn Mark sends in an article about Sound of Freedom. Rob, it is astounding to me that on completely unfounded evidence, Guardian reviewer Brumesco throws shade on Sound of Freedom, accusing the film of being QAnon adjacent and going on about fringe theories that don't even feature in the film. Yet, on the 13th of June this year, The Guardian released their own short about child trafficking in a 15-minute presentation called The Hunt for India's Stolen Children. In it, Sudhasree Replon, the coordinator for a nonprofit organization, the Goran Base Gram Bikas Kendra, GGBK, admits that at least one victim they have recovered has said some children have blood taken from them. That doesn't automatically mean the child's blood was extracted for an Indian QAnon practicing cult, of course, but the Guardian obviously didn't feel there should be any ramifications leaving that tidbit in. Then The Sound of Freedom is released. The Guardian, oh hey look, someone else is talking about child trafficking. Can't have people's focus taken away from our editorial. Let's throw a damning accusation like, I don't know, undertones support QAnon practices. For why? What threat does Sound of Freedom have for The Guardian? Another way to discredit a movie is to label it a faith-based film. This works, just ask John C. He won't give Sound of Freedom a chance. And in so doing, the words of Variety's Owen Gleiberman, we miss out on a solidly made and disquieting thriller in which Jim Caviezel plays Tim Ballard, A beatific G.I. Joe meets George C. Scott in Hardcore meets an avenging Jesus. But if you were to ask Neil Harmon, Angel Studios CEO, he will tell you that Sound of Freedom is not a faith-based movie. We made the film for everyone. It is not a faith-based movie. It's an amazing movie. Source Sound of Freedom Q&A with Caviezel and Monteverdi. Of course he's going to praise the object of his investment, but that's not my point. In conclusion, regardless of whether Sound of Freedom is a faith-based movie or not, I always appreciate well-developed characters and well-orchestrated stories that do not shy away from hard issues, that leave me contemplating life and what I can do with my gifts and abilities to bring a bit of cheer into a dreary and dismal world. Iora tonu, ikona tonu. May you always be well and strong. Glenn Mark. By the way, that's Maori. Now, here's the thing that I would say about all of this. Look, anyone who works in Africa, I have a friend, the lovely Carrie David, who I've worked with, who's done a documentary on female rangers tracking poachers in Africa who are going after big game. There's a lot of people around the world that eat a lot of fucked up shit that they shouldn't, or ground up animal tusks, killing these beautiful animals because they believe that something provides some kind of quality. It's hogwash, of course, but they do it. And a lot of animal trafficking is based on ridiculous ideas of imbibing certain bodily substances or eating things made of cooked whatever you want to say. People believe this shit. So do I think that there's weird trafficking amongst the elites of children that are torturing kids to create adrenochrome? I'm not making this up. Adrenochrome is a real thing. It's actually a real... I didn't know that. I thought it was a made-up thing, that adrenochrome was something they... But apparently the adrenochrome, the way that people in QAnon understand it, is adrenochrome is created when kids are tortured and they're bled out, and that the blood is drank by the democratic satanic worshipping elites. I mean... I only wish there was that kind of organization in our political structures. No, I'm being facetious. Before everybody jumps all over me. I don't believe any of that. I think it's all hogwash. But it wouldn't surprise me that there are places in the world where that's actually done, because we see it with our big game in Africa. I mean, people eat all kinds of things thinking whatever qualities they're going to obtain. The men are going to, it's big game Viagra, whatever they think. People are fucking nuts. And it would not surprise me. I mean, what human beings do to other human beings, the levels of depravity and what we do and what happens. I mean, all you have to do is go on the internet and look up true crime stuff. You can see the most horrific shit has happened to kids. It happens to kids every day. No one is worse than other human beings. Hell is other people. And, the thing is, you can take a really interesting story, embellish it. I mean, Mr. Ballard seems to be that kind of a guy, and now he has a movie. But I have to say this. Speaking of Angel Studios, and I can't believe I'm even going to say this. So, I'm always looking at trying to keep up on what's going on in the world, and in terms of entertainment. Let me see. Okay, I watched, and I'm gonna put this in. I don't want somebody to like give me a hard time and be like, "Are you promoting Angel Studios?" Look, I don't give a fuck if somebody's making a faith-based movie. Usually, faith-based movies are not great. I worked on one. I was the assistant editor of a movie I'm actually really proud of called Like Dandelion Dust. Like Dandelion Dust, that Carrie and I, who made Agent Cody Banks, she produced it. I was the assistant editor on a faith-based movie called Like Dandelion Dust that starred Mira Sorvino and Barry Pepper. And I stand behind that movie. I think it's a terrific movie. It has to do with adoption and parenthood, and I think it's really good. Now, I'll say that. Now, what is my point here? Angel Studios is putting out a movie in December called The Shift. That is a multiverse movie that apparently Neil McDonough from Star Trek First Contact is playing. Well, I'll just put the trailer in the... and I got to say, I'm in. I'll watch that shit. Like that, the shift is the kind of thing that I put the trailer down there. I defy you, imagination connoisseurs, to watch the trailer for the shift and not go, oh my God, I got to see that. Clearly, Angel Studios, there is going to be a faith-based bent to the story. I mean, come on. But as far as faith-based movies go, the trailer, I'm in. I'll go see it. The shift. Your mileage may vary. I put the trailer in the chat. Let's see if you'll dig it. Be curious. Because if you don't, I know I only have myself to blame. But I watch it, I'm like, what the hell is this? I'm in. It's like the Adjustment Bureau meets Multiverse of Madness meets Everything Everywhere All at Once meets God or the devil, as it is. So, hey, and I'll watch anything, science fiction, fantasy, and horror. Bring it on, because I'll watch it. REG has been a member for 7 months. Thanks, REG. Appreciate that. Oh, no, Word Balloon. I'm going to make you watch the Lower Decks. I mean, not Lower Decks. What is it? You have to watch Will Wheaton's show. The show that I always forget the name of it because you know what it is. The Captain's Table. Actually, I call it the Agony Booth, to be honest. Yeah, it's on there. Scott Bartholomew says, when is 10 and 20 getting dropped? I'll tell you something. So I wrote a 10-page script for the first episode of 10 and 20, and it was 40 minutes long. So right now I'm in the process of editing it down. I'm going to try and finish it this weekend if I can, but it's going to drop next week. It'll probably drop pre-Comic-Con, but it's a lot of work. A lot more work than I thought. So, yeah. Anyway, sort of interesting. But, yeah, crazy stuff. But it's good stuff. BA says, the machine that made the worst Indiana Jones movie ever is about to be shut down. So what happens next? When you're losing money, it's not connecting with the public, what do? Is there hope on any level? I don't know. I thought watching the trailer for The Shift was pretty good. No. Look, here's the thing. I'm not convinced. Indiana Jones was not... Dial of Destiny is not a terrible movie. It's just a movie that I thought it was maybe unnecessary. But I felt that of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull too. Look, for every movie across the Spider-Verse, Mission Impossible, opening, Dead Reckoning, Part 1, people are loving it. Look, you can't rely on it. It's so interesting. Relying on Indiana Jones, that franchise, bringing it back when your lead actor is pushing 80 when they're shooting it and is 80 now. I don't know why anybody would do that. I don't know. And clearly they didn't have the kind of story. I thought the story that they went with that old man trope, like the old embittered guy, dead son, estranged family. Why'd they have to do that? Like, they can do that in any movie. What is the Indiana Jones equivalent of being a 70-year-old college professor? I would have gone the exact opposite direction. And I think that they took a character. Here's the thing. I didn't feel joy in Dial of Destiny. I didn't feel joy. Indiana Jones movies, all three of them, filled me with joy. I love Temple of Doom. The opening scene in Club Obi-Wan, amazing. The scene when they are in the plane and they fall out in the inflatable raft, hey, that could happen. But that whole opening 20 minutes is joyous. You have a smile on your face the whole time. Not in Dial of Destiny, I didn't. It wasn't joyful. Indiana, just like, I say this, I've been saying this a lot, but Zack Snyder's, as much as I enjoy his take, his operatic take, superhero movies don't need operatic takes. They need joy. Captain America Winter Soldier, arguably one of the best of the MCU films, even though that movie's very serious and deals with conspiracy thriller and Hydra and Robert Redford and S.H.I.E.L.D. being infiltrated and all that, very dour, joyful. I mean, the opening scene before they attack that ship, the conversation that Black Widow's having with Captain America or Anthony Mackie, them meeting, jogging on your left, joy. They've forgotten how to do that. And it's because if James Mangold had gone to Kathleen Kennedy and said, I have an idea for an Indiana Jones movie, and I'd be willing to bet that Indiana Jones movie would have kicked ass. The problem is now they decide, the corporations decide, the IP owners decide, we're going to make this movie because it's going to make money. Now we have to go find somebody to actually make it. It should be the reverse. Why don't the IP holders of these franchises that people love, why don't they go out to filmmakers and start fishing, throwing out, fly fishing and baiting the lure and going out there and going, hey, filmmakers, we want to make, or better yet, go to the, there's always a list of the 10 directors. It's usually 5, but 10, let's make it 20. The 20 top directors in Hollywood. And why don't the IP owners go, hey, we're interested in making a new Indiana Jones movie with Harrison Ford at 78. Canonically, he's 70. What would you do? We're making an invitation, an offer to go out and you pitch the 20 biggest directors in the world. We are inviting you to come in and pitch us. And if we like your pitch, we're going to let you go make that movie. I bet if they did that, if they had a filmmaker that was passionate, that came in, and we're talking A-list filmmaker, you would get a better film than Dial of Destiny, because it did not organically come out of a filmmaker's desire to make that film. It was a job. And I think James Mangold did a great job, but it was a job nonetheless. And how do you expect to make a film that's that successful when, by its very definition, it was designed to be nothing more than a corporate product? Movies are inherently the collision between art and commerce. But the problem is, it used to work really well. Now it doesn't, because the studios, driven by their corporate overlords at Wall Street, want bigger and bigger and bigger returns. When I don't understand that at all. Why not have a business that can guarantee you a certain amount of profit that's going to gross $10 billion a year, and you're going to make a profit of $2 or $3 billion a year? That's a good business every year. It might not grow anymore, but if you can keep that over 20, 30, 40 years, and you know you're going to make that much money, I mean, maybe keep up with inflation or something. Isn't steady business great? Year after year, decade after decade, rather than having a business where you're because growth businesses always will, especially in the streaming world, there's only so many households in every country. And you can figure out what that number is. And you're only going to be able to get to a certain number, and then you're done. There are no more people on the earth. There are no more households. There's no more people that can subscribe. No, well, what about all these new places that are going to open up? What if we get a transmitter on the top of Mount Everest or whatever? Still, slow and steady, find those businesses. The growth, everybody wants growth. That's going to lead to the end of everything, I think. Ernest Rister says, Dear Earl of Erudition, I am a night owl. I just woke up. What'd I miss? Hey, here's $10. Now, please stay. Okay, hang on. Hey, here's $10. Now, please say, Passamaddaddy. No, Passamaquacky. Wait, I know. It's Passamaschlotty. Elliot says, thanks. Well, there you go, Ernest. I hope I did a good job. Did I do a good job? Scott Batholomew says the Dune 2 trailer looks badass. It does indeed. I can't wait to see Dune 2, and I really hope he gets to make Dune Messiah, because people will finally stop talking about Dune being a white savior story. I can assure you, it's not. If you haven't read Dune Messiah, you don't know what's coming. And I wish you all the best, because you're going to have a really good time seeing what happens in that story. I can't wait to see Dune 2. It looks great. Culture Wars Diplomacy sends in a super chat and says, the TV show Suits had a take. It's not the name, it's the quality of the product. I agree. Suits is great. By the way, I got to tell you something. Suits, this is a funny thing. I'd never seen an episode of Suits. I know Meghan Markle's in it. That's all I knew about Suits. Recently, the Suits pilot, I had seen the clip. The only thing that's not true. The only thing I'd seen of Suits was the clip where the kid, the guy, the other main character goes in. He's not a real lawyer, but he memorized the bar, and he sits down, and why should I let you work here? You let me be a lawyer, and I'm going to take a chance on you, and why should I? They went to Harvard. You didn't. I saw that clip, and I'm like, that's a really good scene. I always liked that scene, and I meant to, like, get around to watching Suits, and it was one of those things where you're flipping around. I don't know, it was on, I don't know where it was. I'm like, Suits. And, like, I watched the first episode. I'm like, I love legal shows anyway. And I'm like, why didn't I watch this show? And I'm like, I watched, like, the first 4 episodes. I'm like, this is fucking great. Maybe all you're going, of course it's great. Again, if somebody had taken it off the air and didn't want to pay the residuals, I might not have seen it. But now I'm gonna watch all of it. So, yeah, I really liked it. I thought it was really good. So, Groovy Don't Play has been a member for 14 months. Thank you, Groovy Don't Play. I love that name. Listen, so for those of you who don't know, obviously the 1982 Greatest Geek Year Ever documentary, the second episode with William Shatner, starts airing on Saturday night at 8 o'clock. It will be available on the CW app Sunday morning, and then you can catch up with it again on broadcast on Tuesday at 8 o'clock. And for this coming Saturday and for 2 other Saturdays after, you can catch up with the 4-part documentary. Now, I don't know if I should say this. Just keep an eye out. The production team that worked on that project might have another project, and I might be involved. That's all I can say. And you'll hear about it in the next couple weeks, I think. But there you go. Oh, Kurt says Suits is terrible. Oh, well, at least the first 4 episodes were good. But anyway, on that note, I'm going to end this show. I want to thank everybody for generously supporting the channel via Super Chats and tips. I also want to point out, King Tanik, Israel, who does the Otaku Experience, does a really great job. I know if you're interested in anime, you probably already watch it. But if you're not, give him a look. Give him a watch. It's pretty good. He does a really, really good job. I wanna call him out. He's 21 years old. Does a killer job. Great content creator. He's directed a documentary already. He's got a big future. Check out his show. Also, DJ's Architects of Imagination. If you love video games, check out that show. Every episode's great. The Designing Hollywood is not on this channel. It's still on the John Campea show, but check that out too. There'll be another episode dropping, and we've got some. I was going to go to Spain to do some work because of the writer's strike. We had to postpone it. Now with the actor's strike, we're going to postpone it even further. I can't decide. I have to find out if Tango Shalom is officially opening in Germany in October. This would be something, because to be honest, I'm on the fence about this. I couldn't afford to go to Europe, but I'm thinking about crowdfunding a trip there. And I would use the money to not only get there, but to travel around Europe and do events, do Robservations events, Burnetwork events, and just go meet with all of you and use the crowdfunded money to buy you all booze. But I would travel around, not bare bones. Not staying in posh hotels, but just travel around to different countries in Europe and have meet and greet events and broadcast live, do live Robservations. How cool would it be if I went to like Germany and France and other countries in Europe like Norway where Terrier is, go to UK, just get hammered with Emma Bannon, go out to Soho and have her take me around to illicit clubs where people are doing poppers and all kinds of things. No, I'm not, just kidding. Not really. But, and broadcast and have all of you imagination connoisseurs, especially you who live in Europe, and do live shows with all of you. Now, I don't know if I should crowdfund that. Is that weird? Is that gross? People are like, oh, Rob Burnett's crowdfunding a trip to Europe. I can't. I live on such a thin margin. I can't afford it right now. But it'd be fun. I mean, I wouldn't need a lot of money. I'd have to look into it. But if Tango Shalom is, in fact, it's supposed to open in Germany, that would be a reason for me to go to Europe. But then from there, travel around and get Dieter Bastian to go with me. I don't know where we'd go do things. It'd be fun. And just go meet people in Europe and do live broadcasts with y'all. Because I know no one says y'all. I don't know. If you have any thoughts on this, write me, send me letters. If you think I'm an idiot, that I shouldn't do it, it would be gauche. I want to hear. Tell me what you think. On that note, there are a few crowdfunding campaigns I will be running in the future for certain products, some cool stuff that we'll be making. And the Imagination Connoisseurs writing contest, if you've already submitted stories, don't worry. We haven't forgotten you. We are going to start that up again after we start the Imagination Connoisseur show. The Imagination Connoisseurs, which is going to start on the 25th, the Tuesday after Comic-Con, which is a week from this coming Tuesday, if all works out well. So anyway, on that note, I want to thank Tom Jr. Jackson for, Football Frequency writes in and says, I watched The Lure. Bold. A fish-fingering bang-up of classical mermaid tropes and spiraling misery in a slashing musical. I love the ending. So Football Frequency, it's actually the debut feature of a female Polish filmmaker, and I can't even begin to pronounce her name. But if you haven't seen The Lure, it is out on Blu-ray from Criterion. It is the craziest horror mermaid musical you ever did see. I liked it much better than the live-action Little Mermaid. Not that I disliked it. But if you haven't seen The Lure, you're missing out. So Football Frequency, I'm glad you liked it, and I love that you called it a fish-fingering bang-up of a classic mermaid tropes and spiraling misery in a slashing musical. I love the ending. I'm glad you did. Thank you for loving the ending, because I think it's quite terrific. Quite terrific. So anyway, on that note, Tom Jr. Jackson, thank you for being a moderator. I want to thank everybody for supporting the channel via Super Chats and tips. We do not have a member call this weekend. We have it the following weekend. You know what? We can't. I don't know if I can have it the following weekend because I don't know what my Comic-Con schedule is going to be. By the way, again, Thursday, the 20th, I'll be at Comic-Con. There'll be a Free Enterprise panel. There's a 1982 panel and an Inglorious Trexperts panel, which I am not on. But go check those panels out. So anyway, on that note, remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. Stephen Langford says, dude, Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas is getting a 4K physical release. Did you pre-order the film, sir? Did you like this film? Thanks. I love The Nightmare Before Christmas. I did. I think I pre-ordered it. But I was looking, maybe I didn't because I was waiting to see if there's going to be a steelbook. I love The Nightmare Before Christmas. What's this? What's this? There's white things in the air. Who doesn't love Nightmare Before Christmas? So good. But anyway, there you go. As Destiny Captain says, all these worlds are yours except Europa. Attempt no landings there. Use them together, use them in peace. That was added for the movie, though. Peter Hyams added that shit. But it was still good. And on that note, I would say to all of you, have a better day.